Okay, so, well, for the start of this video, at least you get dogs munching on biscuits in the background instead of snoring. I've been waiting 10 minutes and they've been taking turns at the biscuit dispenser, so I'm just going to start. So, by now, most of you have probably read or heard discussion of the articles put out by various media outlets which discuss the 6 documents that were released to them this week. For those of you who didn't catch my video when I was discussing that, I have actually put together a rather lengthy document which basically pulls together the articles from each one of those media outlets and basically covers all the information that was given by all of them combined. If you want a copy of that document, it is available on my Patreon, and if you are not familiar with my Patreon is free to join, and it is also free to download anything that's on there. There are paid tiers on offer for anyone who wishes to support my channel in that way, but certainly if you're just wanting to grab documents and that's all you want, it's all free. So, after the release of these documents, and following a lot of discussion from those of us on social media, CBC have done an interview with Daniel Martell. It's only brief, again, and it's basically within their news story of the information from the documents. I was considering just playing the clips with Daniel. However, I am going to go through the entire news article. It's only a few minutes long. There's a few things that I need to comment on. There's at least one inaccuracy in there that I want to address. So, on that note, let's just jump in and get straight to it.
Daniel Martell has known since the day Jack and Lily disappeared that he was a suspect. He's been their stepfather for more than 2 years, living together in this trailer. Martell says that's why he has fully cooperated with police.
Yeah, everything from my phone, doing a polygraph exam, and just ask them to do, here you go, search everything, just do everything you can for the kids, right?
Okay, I found myself having a bit of a snicker while I was watching that. And I'm going to have to go back through and actually listen to what he said because I was distracted by the arm waving. And why was I distracted by that? Well, the thing is, it seems that Daniel would like a career as an actor, I believe. In his early interviews, you had no facial expressions, no movement from his body. The head nodding and shaking was so hard to discern that in some instances you had to slow down the video to see what was going on. Also, in his first interviews, there was the fake crying, and a lot of people commented on that fake crying. I remember commenting on the fake crying and the way that he put his hand up to his face and then peered through his hand at the interviewer to make sure that they were paying attention and to see how his performance had landed. It seems that Daniel's a bit of a quick study because he caught on. He must have been watching people's commentaries. And as you will have seen, in his later interviews, he did away with the fake crying. Now, I had been one of the people commenting on the lack of body language, the lack of movement, the lack of anything with his hands. And what we're seeing in this interview now is him just going over the top. He's waving his arms around, but he's still not getting it right because none of it actually matches with his speech. So when you are talking and when you are actually using your hands, your arms, whatever, while you were talking, it is, if you are genuine, it is going to match your speech. It is going to be in time with your speech. But what he is doing is he's making a statement and then throwing his hands up in a way that clearly he thinks is how he is meant to respond. As opposed to, right now, while I'm talking, you can't see me, but I'm doing what I quite often do, and that is I'm kind of waving my hands in a, I don't know, I just do this when I'm talking. I kind of flap my hands around while I'm talking, and it's in time with what I'm saying. It's more about me punctuating what I'm saying. With Daniel, each time he moves his arms, it's an afterthought. So I'm going to play that clip for you again. Also, that way I can actually listen to what he said, so you can see what he's doing with his hands.
Yeah, everything from my phone, doing a polygraph exam, and just ask them to do, here you go, search everything, just do everything you can for the kids, right?
Okay, you got agreements on here you go, but it was quite a strong gesture. To me, it was an almost aggressive gesture. Like, here you go, take the damn phone if you really have to. And we know from listening to past statements and looking at past articles that while on one hand he did claim that he voluntarily handed over his phone, in actual fact, the phones were actually requested from him and Malaya. So, watching this makes me realise that what I was saying before in previous videos about him masking while he was talking is probably quite accurate, because we're seeing much greater head movement while he's talking here, and the head movement actually agrees with the language. So I think he is focusing so hard on trying to do movements with his arms that are going to be convincing that he's actually dropped the mask, essentially. So the whole time he's speaking, he's shaking his head, which is, now clearly we know he's not lying in terms of that they took his phone. We know he's not lying in terms of them doing a polygraph test. So to me that says he is actually showing contempt for them actually taking his phone, and contempt for them actually choosing to do a polygraph test with him. He wasn't happy about the situation. So he's saying, he doesn't even start with a proper sentence. It's like everything from my phone, and he's shaking his head, doing a polygraph exam. And then he must have realised that the part of the narrative that he missed there was that he allegedly volunteered to do the polygraph exam. And he's tried to add that in as an afterthought and just asked them, here you go, search everything, do everything you can for, and he pauses, and I couldn't catch the word that he almost said. It sounded like it started with X or something, but I'm going to play it for you again after this anyway. But there was another word that he was about to say before he said for the kids, right? So that bit there he was struggling with a little bit. So even here, something's not quite right with the way he is communicating. I believe that him shaking his head the whole way through is basically telling us exactly what he thinks of the RCMP. He doesn't like that he had to jump through hoops. He doesn't like that he had to hand over his phone or do a polygraph test. And it confirms for me that actually it wasn't him volunteering to do a test, it was them actually requesting that he do one. But the sentence at the end, and just ask them, here you go, search everything, do everything you can, I mean, it's all garbled. And like I said, I think it's because he realised that he forgot to mention the part where he allegedly volunteered to do the polygraph test. So now he doesn't know where to go with this. But a notice in terms of what he's saying here, the long pause before he says for the kids, which is definitely alarming. He's having trouble getting the sentence out. Do everything you can for the kids. And I mean, let's be real here. From everything that we have looked at the very least, he is involved with covering up whatever happened to those children. So it doesn't surprise me in the least that he can't get the fluency with that sentence of, do everything you can for the kids. Because for him, if they do everything they can for the kids, that would involve actually solving the case and arresting people, in my personal opinion. And I think, like I said, I feel that at the very least, he helped with covering up whatever happened to these children. So it's not in his interests for them to do everything they can for the kids. And I believe that's why you get the pause there. And then at the end, he tacks on, right? Like he's got to make sure that's the right thing to say. Have I got it right this time round? He's not very emphatic about what he's saying here at all. Seems to me like he's just worked extremely hard on the choreography this time and forgotten to actually work on the speech. I also suspect that it may have put him through the loop a little bit when he accidentally forgot to include the part of his narrative where he volunteered to do the polygraph. But at the end of the day, what we're getting from him in that part there is a well-known speech for him now. The handing over the phone, doing the polygraph. But I guess he's a bit out of practice because it didn't come across at the end as being overly genuine when he's saying everything you can for the kids. Especially when he's basically asking for approval there, right? And of course, like I said, the waving of the arms was a little bit excessive. So I'm going to play the very last part, the everything you can for the kids with the right on the end. And maybe someone can pick up what he was trying to say before he said for the kids.
Just do everything you can for the kids, right? Just do everything you can for the kids, right?
Freshly unsealed court documents detail how RCMP combed through bank records, phone data, and GPS locations. Investigators wanted to know the exact whereabouts of Martell and the children's mother, Malaya Brooks Murray, in the days leading up to the children's disappearance, and cross-reference that information with the statements they gave to police. The documents reveal that as of July 16th, investigators did not believe the case was criminal.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in there before I play any more of it, because this is misinformation on a grand scale. So I don't know who was actually working on her script for her, but they got it wrong. So let me just explain a little bit for you. Now, this is from me going through all the published articles that were written about these documents. So there is no reference to anything in those articles relating to July 16th, and I will come back to that date shortly. The dates that are referenced in those articles, and where I'm including CBC here, are May 12th, which was when the polygraph tests were administered to Daniel and Malaya. Then you have May 23rd, where there is a report from a Corporal Curl that is referenced. You have a reference to June 10th, when Lily Sullivan did a polygraph test, and June 12th, when Janie didn't do a polygraph test. The latest date that is referenced is June 12th. And that is throughout all the articles, which is over a month prior to July 16th. So I was like, well, how can they screw this up so badly? Why have they said in here that the documents date through to July 16th, and this claim that up until July 16th it wasn't considered a criminal investigation? So I looked back through articles. July 16th is when they made the announcement that they were doing testing on the pink blanket. Forensic testing on the pink blanket. That's not from a document, that is from a release from RCMP giving information to the public. And saying that you are doing forensic testing on a pink blanket is certainly not saying this case is not a criminal investigation. Now, obviously, I don't have access to these documents that were released, but based on what has been reported by every one of those news channels that got the documents, the latest mention in those documents is June 12th, not July 16th. And here's the thing. June 12th predates when the reward was offered, because the news of the reward came out on June 19th. So what the RCMP have done quite cleverly here is release documents that predate the announcement of the reward. Why is that significant? Now, I've gone through this in a previous video when I discussed the reward, but I'm going to bring up a screen again to just quickly go through it again. But the reward being offered demonstrates quite clearly that as of June 19th, this was a criminal investigation. So the reward is offered under the banner of Rewards for Major Unsolved Crimes. And I'm just going to read through the first paragraph. And like I said, I've done a whole video on this. So if you go back through my playlist, you'll be able to see. The Department of Justice is offering cash rewards of up to $150,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of persons responsible for specific major unsolved crimes. This is something that has been glossed over by so many people. But at the end of the day, this reward isn't for giving information that's going to lead to finding Jack and Lily. The only way that someone who gives information that helps find Jack and Lily is going to be able to claim the reward is if, in finding Jack and Lily, that allows the RCMP to make an arrest. It says quite clearly, this is directly from the Department of Justice website. It says quite clearly that the rewards are for information leading to an arrest and conviction. Now, I also want to point out that the information that they are spouting in terms of these documents prove it's not a criminal investigation comes from a polygraph test administrator person, a polygraph examiner, and from a corporal. Now, I'm going to come back and discuss this polygraph examiner after we finish going through the news article here. But things that we need to acknowledge here is that this is two individuals expressing opinions. Two individuals who aren't knee-deep in the investigation. So I would like to hear it directly from a detective, someone who is actually part of the criminal investigation side of it. And you could say, well, but isn't that what the polygraph testing person is? And like, no. And I'll come back and address that at the end of this video. But basically, they are basing this notion of it's not a criminal investigation from a statement made by Sergeant Chris Dorr, who was the one doing the polygraph tests, who said, at this point in the investigation, Jack and Lily's disappearance is not believed to be criminal in nature. I do not have reasonable grounds to believe a criminal offence has occurred. He says reasonable grounds, meaning that there must be some questions there. And then on May 23rd, you have a Corporal Curl says the case may progress to being criminal should elements of a criminal offence be identified. I would like to hear this said by a lead investigator, not someone who is just doing a job that is within a certain area. Because the polygraph administering person is not necessarily going to know all the evidence that is there for the case. They are basing their assessment on having done a polygraph with 2 individuals at this point in time. Like I said, I'm going to discuss that at the end of this video. As for this Corporal Curl, well, we know that's not the head of the investigation as far as I've heard. So that is, again, someone who may not be privy to all the evidence that exists in this case. Anyway, let's get back to this news story.
By that point, 6 polygraph tests had been done, including on both Brooks Murray and Martell. They were also done on Martell's mother, on Brooks Murray's mother and her partner, and on the children's biological father. Brooks Murray was given a polygraph in what police describe as an effort to eliminate her as a suspect in causing her children's disappearance and possible murder. She passed, and so did Martell.
Now, I don't even need to look this one up. The actual language that was used in the report was that they had essentially been deemed as being truthful when answering 4 questions. 4 questions which were redacted. So there was no actual wordage that said they actually passed. This is just an inference that has been made by these media outlets reading the documents. We can't read the documents, so we don't know how accurate this information is. But even now, they're starting to misreport.
They've done a full background check as much as they could possibly do, and I mean, I'm pretty thankful for them to spend the time and spend the resources to try to figure out everything.
Okay, honestly, that was almost painful to watch. The big standout for me there was the cadence, the complete lack of tempo when he's talking, and the head movements. First of all, when he says they've done a full background, as he says full, his head nearly shakes off his shoulders. He shakes it so hard and puts so much emphasis on the word full. It's not something that he was particularly impressed about. He was not happy that they really, really dug into his background. In terms of what it was he was about to say before he said full background check, I think he was just basically stopping himself from using language that probably wasn't appropriate for a media interview. I don't see anything in that in terms of deception or anything else. I think he was just going to use a rather strong word, which again does point to the fact that he wasn't happy about how much they dug into his background. He goes on to say, as much as they could possibly do, and he goes, and there's a long pause. Now, while he's saying all the as much as they possibly do, he's shaking his head again. And then after the and, while he's pausing, that's when you get like a nod. And I don't know if that nod is him telling himself you've got to keep talking, because it doesn't correspond with any language. And then this is where the wheels fall off. Honestly, I think even Stevie Wonder would be impressed. The head movement that was going on there was insane. So we get lots of pauses, we get head tilting, and like I said, we get some major Stevie Wonder head movement going. So this is all after a long pause, and he goes, I mean, and then there's a long pause. I'm pretty thankful. And as he says thankful, he kind of tilts his head off to one side. It's not really a shake. It's not really a nod. It's just a quick tilt to one side. It's your asymmetry. He is actually showing the opposite of what he's saying. While he's saying, I'm pretty thankful, he's demonstrating with his head movement that actually he feels contempt towards them for basically digging into his world so much. And he pauses again after saying, I'm thankful for them. It's not even like a proper sentence. I'm thankful for them doing something, for them existing, for them eating bananas for lunch. When someone's not talking in full sentences like that, or in at least grammatically logical sentences like that, then you know that what they're saying isn't entirely truthful. So he's basically not thankful for them butting in at all. And then after a pause, he says, to spend the time. And he pauses, he says, and pauses again, and spend the resources to, and you get another long pause. And as he's saying spend the resources, that's when we get our first Stevie Wonder moment. It's that whole extreme head movement, almost the whole body moving off to one side, like I said, Stevie Wonder style. So for him, the spending resources, he really doesn't give a rat's ass. He's showing contempt. He thinks it's a waste of money for them to have been spending resources on polygraph tests, on all these background checks and stuff on him. Now that doesn't say, obviously, that he is guilty of anything. It just says he's pissed off about it. But to me, someone who is genuinely concerned for the welfare of these children is not going to be bothered by investigators focusing on them as part of the investigation. They're going to just be like, well, I get it. They want to do everything in their power to find the children, and they have to eliminate us before they can go on and look further out. So I'm not bothered by it. But he is very, very bothered by all this attention on him from the Mounties. And then after another pause, he says, try to figure out everything. And again, as he's talking about them figuring out everything, we get more Stevie Wonder movements with the head, more contempt. He's really not in favour of them figuring out everything. His language, his cadence, his body language all scream that he is not a happy boy when it comes to this investigation. He's far from impressed that they put him through all that. And that's what he's saying here. He's thankful that they spent the time and the resources to check his phone and do polygraph tests and try to figure out everything. Well, why would you be thankful for that side of it? They were basically just doing part of the investigation, and that's not the part of the investigation that I would expect someone to say they are thankful. I'm thankful that they made me sit in a room for 4 hours while they interviewed me and then made me sit there hooked up to this machine for however long while they interrogated me. Says no one ever. I'm thankful that they took my phone off me and looked at all my personal stuff on the phone. Says no one ever, except Daniel Martell. Here, he should be expressing, well, yeah, it was a bit of an intrusion, but at least they were doing their job. I recognised they were doing their job, and I recognise now that they are focusing on other things, so they've got that out of the way. But no, not him. He's thankful that they did all this to him. It's not logical. And I just want to do a bit of a comparison here. Because after these documents were released, I watched about 10 minutes of It's a Criming Shame because Belinda was on there talking about getting a lawyer and getting temporary guardianship of the children. And Sonny was asking what she thought about these documents, and Belinda was just mind blown. It was like, well, what does this all mean? What does this mean for the investigation? What does this mean for the children? Daniel's not asking any of this. He's not saying, well, now I'm really confused because they're saying it's not a criminal investigation, but I know they're not in the woods. He said that. His mother said that. So many people have said, I know they didn't wander off into the woods. He's not expressing any confusion. He's not expressing any exasperation. He is essentially relieved that the reporters are saying, well, they don't think it's a criminal investigation. Well, wouldn't you be confused? Wouldn't you say, well, okay, maybe they've cleared us, but how do they know that someone else isn't involved? How do they know it's not an abduction? If it's not a criminal investigation and we know they didn't wander off into the woods, what are RCMP saying actually happened? He's not asking these questions at all. That's a huge red flag for me.
An extensive search on Martell's property and the surrounding 8.5 square kilometers has turned up only a few clues. One was a boot print matching Lily's size 11 feet. Another was a pink blanket hanging from a tree found by family members of the children's mother. A piece of blanket was also seized from a garbage bin at the end of the family's driveway. Martell says it was the same blanket, but it had been ripped apart and thrown out.
I mean, it's mysterious as it is because the distance from the garbage bin to where the blanket was found is almost 1 kilometer.
I would have liked to have seen them pan out as he was saying that because he was waving his arm around again. I would have liked to have seen exactly what was going on there. I'm going to say that it sounds like he's said that a few times. It kind of just rolled off pretty easily, but while he was saying it, he was still shaking his head. And he also stuttered on mysterious. I mean, it's mysterious, as it is. Because, and then he draws out the word "the," like he's trying to figure out where he's going with this. The distance from the garbage bin to, draws that out again as well, where the blanket was found is almost 1 kilometre. And then he does that classic Martell move of looking up to make sure that his audience is paying attention and to see how that landed. Followed by this sly sideways look, which I'm really not sure what's going on there. But it is a huge tell for me that he stumbles over the word mysterious. Clearly to him it's not mysterious in terms of that piece of blanket being found in the location where it was found. I would have to say that equally mysterious would be him denying that it was Lily's blanket when it was originally found. I do want to point out that it does look like this investigation is taking its toll on him. He certainly looks like he's not sleeping all that well. And to be honest, when I look at his face, he looks like he is a little bit unwell. I also noticed the poster for Lily and Jack up on the tree or power pole, whatever it is, at a height that would be too high for most people to be able to read by the looks of it.
RCMP have previously said Lily's blanket was sent for forensic analysis. To date, police have received 740 tips and more than 9,300 videos, and say a tremendous amount of careful, deliberate, investigative work is ongoing to locate Lily and Jack.
Careful, deliberate, investigative work. Well, if they're ruling out a criminal investigation, and they've apparently ruled out an abduction, which would fall under a criminal investigation anyway, then they're essentially saying the children are still in the woods. So what is this careful investigation that's going on? Are they standing over a map with pendants and swinging the pendants to figure out a location where the children might be? It is a criminal investigation. Whichever way you look at it is a criminal investigation. Now, I just wanted to finish off by talking about polygraph examiners. Now, the person who was listed was a sergeant by the name of Chris Dorr. He appears to be a more senior member of the RCMP, but he is not exclusively someone who administers polygraph tests. That's just like a feather in his cap. Bit of additional training that he's done, bit of on-the-job training, just a little bit of professional development to improve his skills at his work. Meaning, this is not someone who is full-time doing polygraph tests. Need to establish that for starters. He's a sergeant. He does sergeant work other than administering polygraph tests. Now, because most of us were a bit dumbfounded by what we were hearing with regards to these polygraph tests, I did a bit of research. And here's some of the things I found out. First of all, there was a review done last year by the National Security and Intelligence Review Agency. And one of the things that was mentioned in this review was there are, and I'm quoting this, some issues apparent with the quality control of polygraph exams. And there was a recommendation of basically bringing in new protocols, making changes to basically ensure improved quality control. So that already is something significant. Now, I also looked into how people are trained in the RCMP to become polygraph examiners. So it's basically in-house training, meaning they're not going out to some great organisation like, sending them off to the FBI for training. And yes, I know FBI is American, but I'm just using that as an example. So basically they go to the Canadian Police College, which is basically the same place where you go to become a police officer. And then there are 3 phases to the training. First of all, there's 10 weeks of an academic phase. And that's basically where they're learning a bit of psychology, learning how to actually operate the machines, all the basic stuff like that. And then they have an internship phase. Get this? It goes for a whole 2 weeks. During that phase, It's not like they're sitting there with some legendary polygraph examiner and learning from them. No, they're basically administering tests under supervision. So they're not actually going and watching and working with someone who is a skilled practitioner. They're just going out and doing it under supervision. And then there is a certification phase which lasts for 9 months. During that phase, basically, they conduct tests with indirect supervision, which I would imagine means that their supervisors aren't actually present when they are conducting the tests, but are instead reviewing the results, perhaps. Either way, it really doesn't sound like efficient training. I mean, essentially, they've put more weight on the academic side of it rather than the practical side of it, which shows you just how experienced these people are when they get their qualifications. So it's not surprising when you hear that the NSIRA had issues with the quality control of polygraph exams. Because to me, it sounds like a rather poor method of training examiners. Anyway, that brings us to the end of this video. I know it was a bit more than looking at Daniel, obviously, but like I said, there were a few things in what was being said by this reporter from CBS that I thought needed addressing, and it also seemed like a suitable time to address the issue of the polygraphs. So, on that note, thanks for listening. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit that like button and please leave a comment below. Thank you, and I will catch you in the next one.